and all the ineffable magic that happens in tangible moments. But I realized that what I really want to talk about today is consumerism and how different that is than materialism, and why we, as a people of faith, a community of people of faith, care. So I want to start in earnest by honoring my teacher, Michael Stone, with whom I first had these conversations, and whose life's work was to practice a deeper materialism. He was the first one I heard say so plainly, "We are not materialistic enough." And that can seem counterintuitive, especially this time of year, when every advertisement is about the number of shopping days left before Christmas, or this year, the number of days left before guaranteed delivery by Christmas. But Michael Stone is right. We have a consumer culture obsessed with acquiring items, having the latest or the best, and always having more, thinking that we need more. But once we've amassed these piles, filling our shelves and our garages in every forgotten or colonized corner, then what? If we were truly materialistic, we'd be caring for these things. As Joy Harjo said, we'd honor the maker and honor what's made. Instead, they're usually on a revolving door to Goodwill or the landfill. Let me ask it this way. How many of your items have you owned for 5 years or more? 10? When was the last time you repaired something, brought it to a repair shop, found a new use for an old item instead of buying something? One of the most amoral things happening in our world today, and I know that's a big statement, but I really believe this is so integral that I feel comfortable saying one of the most amoral things happening in our world today is the impossibly cheap prices of goods. I think I've told you that I've been running this no-buy experiment, which has only pushed me further off the materialism cliff. And for months now, I've been learning and saying to myself, things should be expensive. This no-buy for me hasn't been about how little money I can possibly spend. It's looking at my relationship to items and what I do buy, which is mostly food, and what kind of choices I'm making with my purchases. But in thinking about this week's message, I had a major moment of insight. It's not that things should be expensive. It's that things are expensive. And the question is who is paying for it? So let's look at food at the grocery store. If prices are low, who is paying that cost? The land where the food was hastily and industrially grown? The workers who aren't paid a living wage to harvest and tend? The environment for the food to travel here quickly and far, not to mention absorbing all of the chemicals and exhaust of industrial farming? Or maybe it's the store and the employees who are absorbing that cost, not being paid enough, or stores not using more environmental practices. Or is it your body paying the cost of this cheap food, having to process fillers and additives and preservatives? We could apply this same lens to our clothing, our electronics, our furniture. There's a Zen koan that says, "What is the price of rice?" What is the price of rice? And here's where it becomes a justice issue. The ones paying the cost of our artificially cheap goods are the plant beings and the animal beings, the soil beings and the water beings, and also our neighbors and our communities. Communities of color who feel the impact of climate chaos more intensely because of the areas in which they live. Those in developing countries who live amid what we have deemed as our waste. To push it back into materialism instead of consumerism, being materialistic means that when we say we care about something, our material life reflects it. Whether that's only buying from Black-owned bookshops instead of getting books from Amazon or Target, whether that's giving money to activists and organizations on the ground, whether that's showing up to protest or protesting companies with your dollars who are exploiting their workers. Sending our thoughts and prayers can never be a substitute for material action. The material world matters deeply. And I think that many traditional religions have this up and away idea about spirituality, that the physical and material world is something to be endured and overcome and ultimately transcended, a barrier and a test to get us out of here into the realm of spirit, whether we call that heaven or something else. But that vertical transcendence ignores the entrances to holiness that are everywhere and all the time, as Rabbi Lawrence Kushner says. That vertical transcendence ignores the intelligences and sentience of all that we are surrounded by, as Robin Wall Kimmerer implores us to remember. There's this really controversial line in the Bible that says, faith without works is dead. And when we have the up and away mentality, it makes it seem like the bouncer at the gates will need the receipts and proof that you deserve to be there, which then gets into this whole sticky business of earning your way into heaven and a million other things we really don't have time to get into. But in a horizontally transcendent world, your works are your faith. Your actions, your material choices are the very thing of faith. It is what it means to have faith. Faith that the world can in fact be different and that you can be part of that reality now. This is the other point that I want to get to today. This is a great time of year to talk not only about consumerism, but about materialism in a positive light, the beauty and joy of materialism, the joy of the beings we share the world with, the joy of making things with our hands, of sharing food, of hugging loved ones. One of the major things giving me hope for our future as a species right now is how dissatisfied we are with mostly virtual lives. We all want to get back to our families, to our concerts and dance parties and bustling restaurants and humming coffee shops and our students and churches. And I think this experience of being so disembodied has shown us how vital our incarnated life is. And honestly, I imagine that's how the gods feel in the stories that we tell about them. Pretty much all of the major religions have some version of an embodied deity, and often it's painted as some last resort. Nowhere is this more true than a traditional Christian narrative of the story and purpose of Jesus. God was so desperate to reach humans that God became one, humbled and humiliated, stuffed into a gross body and walked around on the earth. A last-ditch effort to reach these pathetic little earthworms. Instead of a body being a last resort for God, what if it went like this? The experience of being in the material world, in a body, is something that God desperately wanted to have. That laughter and hugs, eating and sleeping, running and playing were so wonderful that God was like, count me in. That the smell of fresh bread and the feeling of jumping in a lake were so vital and beautiful, God couldn't stand to miss out on the experience for one more minute. That God's life wouldn't be complete without experiencing the absolute joy and freedom of feeling at home in a body in the world. The story of the birth of Jesus always reminds me that bodies are enviable. That this material world is one in which God chooses to be present. That the living world is full of whatever is divine, and that our own spirituality is tending to here and now, holding soft babies and cleaning up messes, not far and away. And so we consider the price of rice because it is a deeply moral and spiritual question as much as it is philosophical. Things are expensive. It's just a matter of what we value and who is paying the costs, especially if it's not you right away. So I ask you, I beg you, make this your most materialistic Christmas ever. Think about what kind of questions you need to ask yourself when buying. What is the price of rice? Where will this item be in 5 years? Whose hands were on this before it got into mine? And this is painful because we have to wake up to the parts of ourselves and our environment and our community that we have compartmentalized and compromised. If we truly listen to the plant beings, we'd have to reckon with the harm we have done. If we truly accounted for the costs we don't pay, we'd have to see the suffering we've overlooked. And so it becomes easier not to know, easier not to look, easier to think that we're traveling on some linear path and that time's away from us, that we're moving ahead. But we live in circles. We live in communities of impact. There is no such place as a way, and there is nothing that is separate. Our material world teaches us this. I remember living in Alaska, and so few people seemed to care about recycling. I was baffled because we are surrounded by the most gorgeous, unspoiled wilderness. But it was that very sense of abundance and limitlessness that gave permission for the sense that our small actions don't have a consequence. There's always more nature out there. But now living in a city, I see the impact of waste and shallow materialism around me all the time. I think we are afraid to look deeply at the resonance and consequences of our actions, to truly consider the price of rice, to realize that we are always in relationship and that every decision we make affects the whole web. It's easy to forget this as we're all quarantined at home on our devices. I worry that we are afraid to look deeply at the sentience and rights of other beings, the more than human world, and how complicated our choices are. The heart of faith teachings is to be engaged with service, to be a meaningful participant in the material world, and that it's not just bodies in church on a Sunday morning, but it's all of the other material choices you make during the week. This is an expression of your faith, not something we do to get or achieve some kind of enlightenment. So I'm asking you to be more materialistic, incredibly materialistic, because it's the shortest route I know to living ethically in and with the world. To truly value the relationships and generosity and intimacy and reciprocity with things and beings beyond your own self. To realize that we are made of each other, that what we are made of is what we share, and that how and what we buy or don't buy is a potent way to express our faith and to be challenged by our faith every day. Things are expensive, which is to say, our actions have consequences, and the only question is where they're going to be felt and who is going to pay the cost. The price of rice is priceless. This material world, this enviable beingness and being in bodiness draws us further into mystery if we have the boldness and the commitment to faithfully enter. Let it be so. Chuck, I think you have a song for us.